ladies and gentlemen, I did it. It took me over 2 years, 3 save files, and 115 hours, but I finally beat Darkest Dungeon. Also, quick side note, enjoy watching me flounder around trying to make my party, then enter the wrong dungeon. Also, the first minute or so has a couple hiccups because, like an idiot, I was running a virus scan in the background and it very, very slightly caused a bit of a slowdown. What you see before you is the final Darkest Dungeon delve, and as it plays, I figured I'd give my thoughts on the game. Disclaimer, this is just the base game. I do not own any of the DLC aside from the Musketeer, which is literally just a reskin of the Arbalist. I never got the Crimson Court, since at release it made a lot of people unhappy, is still sitting at a mixed rating, and honestly I didn't want to shell out for it even on sale for $5, while I wasn't sure going in that I was going to finish Darkest Dungeon this time. So how is it? It's great, but also infuriating. I'm going to get the negatives out of the way first, so that I can then gush about stuff I enjoy. As many people have said, the grind is real. It's even worse if you go in without any advanced knowledge. There are many ways to alleviate the tedium that exists in the game, but if you don't know about certain aspects prior, then discovering you may have to spend an untold amount of hours leveling a new team when you get hit with some misfortune can kill your desire to play outright. Heck, it happened to me twice. In fact, some changes have been made so that it's easier to recover and catch up to where you were. You can upgrade your stagecoach so that there's a chance you get some level 3 recruits instead of level 0. That way you only need to level them 3 times instead of 6. There are trinkets you can equip which give extra experience, and I've heard that in the DLC there are more buildings you can make which help even more. But that being the case, there are many things that are done that can ruin your experience if you're playing blind. If you complete one of the final dungeons, then any characters that survived will refuse to go into any of the others. Best make sure you've been leveling and building 4 full teams this whole time. For me, this meant just taking every Vestal I could find, so I had a dedicated healer for each of these final excursions. This game is one of the best at teaching you about the sunk cost fallacy. There are so many times when you're in a dungeon, nearly done, and one of your characters dies. It feels bad. But you're nearly done the mission, so you push on. But then you get another hard fight and your entire party wipes. It's discouraging, and it makes you want to quit the game forever. It's not a great feeling. It's even worse if you're in a Darkest Dungeon, get unlucky in your first encounter, lose a character, go to retreat, and as a consequence of surrendering, one of your remaining characters will arbitrarily be chosen to die for doing it. That happened to me the first time I ever entered the Darkest Dungeon. So frustration rises, and you figure why not just throw them all away then. The hardest thing to learn is to take your losses and save as much as you can. But at the same time, that's the whole design of the game. It's amazing at raising the stakes and making each encounter tense. It's just unfortunate that when things go terribly wrong, it gives you the feeling of not wanting to play the game anymore. There's one more slightly unfortunate circumstance. There's only 2 real healer classes, and even then I always found Vestal way more useful than Occultist, since the Vestal can heal multiple people at once. I'm sure the dedicated players have all these synergistic amazing builds, but for the average player going in, they'll fall back on the Holy Trinity: tank, healer, DPS. It's called the Holy Trinity for a reason, and that means Vestals galore. There are so many unique characters in the game: Crusader, Abomination, Leper, Hellion, Houndsmaster, Man-at-Arms, Jester, Arbalist, and more, but when it comes to healers, you're stuck with Vestal or Occultists. That means for each 4-person team, one of your slots will always be one of those 2 classes. It's a bit disappointing, and I wish they'd given us more types of dedicated healers. The final thing, which isn't a huge gripe, but doesn't help with the tedium aspect, is that you end up having to fight the same bosses 3 times, once at each difficulty tier. And as far as I could tell, aside from more damage, there was no new difficulty mechanics-wise. I understand this was a kickstarted game and its budget wasn't the largest. Making bosses is hard, and a sequel is now in the works, which will hopefully improve on this aspect, but it doesn't stop the fact that facing the same bosses over and over gets tiresome. But enough of that. On to greatness. While there may only be 2 real healers, there are so many classes, and it's amazing. Playing with all these characters, trying out different movesets and which classes go well together is an amazing and fun experience. For example, in the second Darkest Dungeon quest, I failed my first time in, and lost my only Man-at-Arms, who was my Garter. For those unaware, there's a skill enemies use which deal huge amounts of damage and stress, but you can equip a trinket to negate it. The only thing is that you get 3 of these trinkets, so one of your party will always be vulnerable. When I went in the second time, I brought my Houndsmaster, who I hadn't played much, But he had a guard skill, and having a guard is essential. I then proceeded to destroy the dungeon, and where my previous man-at-arms got, smacked around into oblivion, my Houndsmaster dodged every single attack that came at him. Discovering all the unique ways to build a party is just a fun and enjoyable experience that brings you back wanting more. Darkest Dungeon has two main parts to it, the Dungeon Delve and then the rest in town. When you get to town, you can buy and upgrade skills, equipment, treat diseases, stress, or quirks, and upgrade your buildings around town. This downtime is essential for the pacing of the game and really helps contribute to that just one more dungeon mindset. If anything, much like XCOM, I wish there was a little more to do in town to prolong the downtime. The final thing I'll say about the game is that I love the atmosphere and lore. As I mentioned, it was a Kickstarter game, so there isn't a lot of story. Most of it's told through either the opening cutscene or letters you pick up as you travel through dungeons, but what's there is good. I hope that the sequel puts a bit more emphasis on story and can explore even more Lovecraftian mythos. Ultimately, I think this game succeeded in doing exactly what it wanted to do. While it may not appeal to everyone, especially with all the grinds you may be forced to do if you lose a party, it's still a great experience and I don't regret finishing it, even though it took me a few tries. I don't have much else to say, other than I only took Dima and Reynaud with me because not only do I get an achievement, but they're also the two you're given at the start of the game and the only ones directly tied into the plot, even if it is very vague and really not fleshed out. I'll let my final battle speak for itself though, and spoilers, I am really unlucky with the first stage Imperfect Reflections. Seriously, is it pure RNG or is the Ancestor supposed to summon so many perfect reflections over and over? I think I went through 5 or 6 summon rounds of only perfects. But that's all for me. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.
is fluid. It can be changed, reshaped, remade. flesh is immortal. It is undying. pray it does not take too hideous a form. The world, progenitor of life, father and mother, alpha and omega, our creator and our destroyer. Victory. A hollow and ridiculous notion. We are born of this thing, made from it, and we will be returned to it in time. The great family of man. A profusion of errant flesh, multiplying, swarming, living, dying, until the stars align in their inexorable formation, and what sleeps is roused once more. To hatch from this fragile shell of earth and rock, and bring our inescapable end. So seek solace in a manner befitting your lineage, and take up your nugatory vigil, haunted forever by that sickening prose echoing through the infinite blackness of space and time. Ruin has come to our family.